They said the merger was impossible. 3 firms, 50 lawyers, and a coding error that was bleeding the company $1 million an hour. The CEO, Harrison Sterling, was ready to fire his entire board. But he didn't find the answer in a boardroom, and he didn't get it from an Oxford graduate. He found it on a grease-stained napkin, written in red lipstick by a waitress who had just poured his coffee. She fixed a $100 million problem in 30 seconds, turned around, and went back to scrubbing tables. But when Harrison found out who she really was, it didn't just save his company, it destroyed his enemies. You are not going to believe what happened next. The rain battered the windows of the Gilded Fork, a high-end steakhouse in downtown Seattle that catered to people who didn't look at prices. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil and quiet desperation. Chloe stood near the kitchen doors, adjusting her apron. It was 2 sizes too big, bunching at the waist. She was 26 but looked younger, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, fraying bun. To the patrons, she was invisible, a floating pair of hands delivering sparkling water and removing bread plates. That was how she liked it. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility meant no one asked about the gap in her resume, or why a woman with eyes that sharp was wiping crumbs off tablecloths for minimum wage plus tips. "Table 4, the manager, Rick, hissed, shoving a tray of whiskey sours into her hands. "Don't mess this up. That's the Sterling Group. They're celebrating. Or mourning. I can't tell." Chloe took the tray. She knew who they were. Everyone knew who they were. Harrison Sterling was the face of modern aerospace logistics. He was 32, ruthlessly efficient, and currently staring at a tablet screen like he wanted to punch through the glass. She approached the table. There were 4 men. 3 of them were older, balding, wearing suits that cost more than Chloe's rent for a year. The 4th was Harrison. He wasn't wearing a tie. His collar was unbuttoned, and he looked exhausted. "It's a bleeding algorithm, Harrison," one of the older men, a CFO named Arthur Pendergast, argued, his face flushing red. "The optimization code for the new fuel lines is spitting out errors. Every time we run the simulation for the merger, the valuation drops by 12%. We are losing altitude before we even take off." "Then fix it," Harrison said. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. "We signed the deal with Locklear Dynamics in 48 hours. If that valuation isn't stable at $4.2 billion, the deal is dead. And if the deal dies, Arthur, you're retiring early." Chloe set the drinks down. Clink, clink, clink. She tried to tune them out. She really did. But her brain didn't work like that. It never had. As she placed Harrison's whiskey down, she glanced at the tablet Arthur was aggressively tapping. It displayed a cascading set of differential equations, a fluid dynamics model meant to predict fuel efficiency over long-haul flights. She froze. It was subtle, a variable misplacement in the 3rd line of the drag coefficient sequence. It wasn't a coding error, it was a math error, a fundamental misunderstanding of the interaction between atmospheric pressure and the new alloy they were using. "We need more time," another executive whined. "We need to push the signing back." "No," Harrison snapped, grabbing his glass without looking up. "No extensions. Fix the code." Chloe's hand lingered on the table for a fraction of a second too long. The numbers were screaming at her. It was like hearing a piano key hit off pitch in a silent room. They're trying to force a linear solution on a non-linear problem, she thought. It's going to crash the simulation every single time. "Excuse me," she said. The silence that followed was instant and suffocating. All 4 men looked up. Arthur looked offended. The other 2 looked confused. Harrison just looked at her, his grey eyes narrowing. He saw a waitress in a baggy uniform. "Refill?" Harrison asked, his tone dismissing her before she'd even finished speaking. No, sir, Chloe said. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous. She needed this job. She needed the anonymity. But the error was right there, staring at her. I couldn't help but overhear. The drag coefficient in your simulation, it's set to a static integer. But at the altitude you're modeling, the atmospheric variable makes it exponential. Arthur scoffed, a wet, dismissive sound. Excuse me. We are discussing proprietary aerospace technology. I think you should stick to the menu, miss. Arthur, Harrison said, holding up a hand. He didn't look at Arthur. He kept his eyes on Chloe. Go on. Chloe gripped her serving tray tight, her knuckles turning white. The code isn't broken. The math is. You're telling the computer that air resistance is constant. It's not. If you change the third variable in the second sequence to a dynamic derivative, the simulation will balance. The valuation won't drop. It'll actually go up. Arthur laughed. It was a cruel, barking laugh. Harrison, this is absurd. A waitress giving us lectures on fluid dynamics? I'll have the manager. Give me a pen, Harrison said. Sir? Arthur blinked. Give me a pen, Harrison repeated, louder this time. He shoved a heavy linen napkin toward Chloe. He pulled a silver fountain pen from his jacket pocket and held it out, uncapped. Show me. Chloe hesitated. Taking the pen felt like crossing a bridge she had burned 5 years ago. If she did this, the invisibility was gone. But the arrogance on Arthur's face, the way he looked at her like she was furniture, ignited a cold fire in her gut. She took the pen. She bent over the table. The white linen absorbed the ink quickly. She didn't write code. She wrote the corrected equation, slashing through the static variables and replacing them with the complex calculus that governed chaotic airflow. She worked fast, her handwriting jagged but legible. In 30 seconds, she was done. She capped the pen and set it down. You don't need to rewrite the software. Just patch this formula into the core logic. The error loop will close. She pushed the napkin toward Harrison. Enjoy your dinner, gentlemen, she whispered. She turned on her heel and walked away, her legs shaking. She went straight to the kitchen, leaning against the stainless steel counter, breathing hard. Stupid, she told herself. Stupid, arrogant, reckless. Chloe, Rick the manager barked from the pass. Table 6 needs water. Move. She pushed off the counter and went back to work. She didn't look at table 4 again. 10 minutes later, when she risked a glance, the table was empty. They had left cash, a heavy stack of bills, but no tip on the credit card receipt. Harrison Sterling was gone. The next morning, Chloe was fired. She had just clocked in, the smell of stale coffee and bleach greeting her, when Rick called her into the back office. He didn't look her in the eye. Corporate called, Rick said, shuffling papers. Complaint from a VIP table last night. Said the staff was intrusive. You know the policy, Chloe. We are seen, not heard. I helped them, Chloe said, her voice trembling with frustration. I fixed their problem. You annoyed a billionaire, Chloe. That's not fixing a problem. That is the problem. He slid an envelope across the desk. Your final pay. Don't make a scene. Chloe took the envelope. It contained $300. Her rent was due in 2 days. She didn't argue. She couldn't afford to have a reference check where she was labeled difficult. She took the money, threw her apron in the laundry bin, and walked out into the grey Seattle drizzle. She spent the afternoon in the public library, using the free computer to search for warehouse jobs. She avoided the news sites. She didn't want to see Harrison Sterling's face. She didn't want to know if her solution worked. If it hadn't worked, she was a fool. If it had worked, and she was fired anyway, the injustice would make her scream. At 4:01 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. "Hello? Chloe Winters." A woman's voice. Crisp, professional, terrifying. "Yes? This is Sarah Jenkins, executive assistant to Harrison Sterling. Mr. Sterling would like you to come to his office immediately." Chloe froze. I was fired this morning. Because of him. Mr. Sterling is aware. He would like to rectify the situation. A car is waiting for you outside the library. A black Lincoln Navigator. Chloe looked out the library window. Sure enough, a massive black SUV was idling at the curb, rain slicking its tinted windows. "I'm not in trouble?" Chloe asked, feeling like a child. "That depends," the woman said, "on whether or not you want a job that pays more than tips." The ride to the Sterling Tower took 20 minutes. Chloe sat in the back, clutching her worn backpack. She was wearing jeans and a thrift store sweater. She looked nothing like the corporate sharks walking into the glass and steel skyscraper. When she arrived on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was electric. People were running, literally running, with files. Phones were ringing. But as she stepped off the elevator, the noise seemed to die down. Sarah, the assistant, met her. She was a tall woman with glasses who looked like she could organize a military coup in her sleep. "Follow me." They walked past rows of glass offices. Inside one, Chloe saw Arthur Pendergast. He was packing a box. He looked up, saw Chloe, and his face went an ugly shade of purple. He slammed his blinds shut. Sarah opened the double doors at the end of the hall. Harrison Sterling was standing by the window, looking out over the city. The massive boardroom table was covered in papers, schematics, and, right in the center, framed under a heavy glass paperweight, the napkin. He turned. He looked different than he had the night before. Sharper, less exhausted, more predatory. "It worked," he said. "No hello. No small talk." "I figured it would," Chloe said, standing her ground. "Arthur's team ran the simulation all night," Harrison said, walking toward her. "Using your formula. The valuation stabilized. Actually, it increased. We closed the deal with Locklear an hour ago. The stock is up 4% since the announcement." He stopped 3 feet from her. He was tall, intimidatingly so. "Who are you?" "I'm Chloe." "Chloe who?" "HR did a background check on you this morning. Chloe Winters, high school diploma, no college degree. 5 years of waiting tables in diners from Chicago to Seattle. No criminal record. No debt other than basic living expenses." He tilted his head. "You don't exist, Chloe. People who can do multivariable calculus in their heads on a napkin don't spend 5 years serving eggs." "Maybe I like eggs," she said defensively. "You're lying," Harrison said softly. "But I don't care. Not yet." He walked back to his desk and picked up a file. "Arthur Pendergast is leaving the company to pursue personal interests, which leaves me with a vacancy in the Strategic Operations Department, Head of Data Analysis." Chloe's mouth went dry. "I don't have a degree. I don't care about a piece of paper. I care about the napkin." He tossed the file onto the table. "Salary is $200,000 a year. Full benefits. Signing bonus of $50,000. You start now." Chloe stared at him. The number was astronomical. It was freedom. It was safety. But it was also a spotlight. "What's the catch?" she asked. "The catch," Harrison said, his eyes darkening, "is that half the board wants me gone. They think I'm reckless. Hiring a waitress as a senior executive is going to give them all the ammunition they need to bury me. If you fail, I'm finished. And if you fail, you'll be the laughing stock of the industry." He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "So, Chloe Winters, are you a genius, or was last night a fluke?" Chloe looked at the napkin. She looked at the rain hitting the glass window. She thought about the $300 in her pocket and the landlord who wouldn't wait. She stepped forward and picked up the file. "I'll need a computer," she said. "And coffee. Black." Harrison smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It was terrifyingly charming. "Welcome to the Shark Tank, Chloe." The elevator ride to the 40th floor became Chloe's daily purgatory. It had been 4 days since Harrison Sterling plucked her from the obscurity of the Gilded Fork and dropped her into the Shark Tank of Sterling Logistics, and the water was already filling with blood. She was given an office that used to be a storage closet, though it had a spectacular view of the Space Needle. Her computer was state-of-the-art, but her access codes worked only half the time, a glitch, according to IT. But Chloe knew better. She was the organ transplant the body was trying to reject. Her primary antagonist wasn't Arthur Pendergast. He was gone, clearing out his desk in shame, but the woman who had taken his place in the pecking order, Vanessa Holt. Vanessa was the vice president of global communications. She was 30, stunningly beautiful in a way that required money and cruelty, and she had been positioning herself to become Mrs. Harrison Sterling for 3 years. The arrival of a 26-year-old waitress with a messy bun and a brain like a supercomputer had shattered her plans. On Friday morning, the first major hurdle arrived, the integration strategy meeting. Chloe walked into the conference room 5 minutes early. She was wearing a navy blue blazer she had found at a consignment shop. It fit better than her apron, but compared to Vanessa's tailored Chanel suit, it looked like a costume. The room was full. 12 executives, all men except for Vanessa, sat around the mahogany table. Harrison was at the head, looking over a dossier. He didn't look up when Chloe entered. He was testing her. He had thrown her into the deep end, and he was waiting to see if she would swim or drown. "Coffee, light and sweet," a man named Elias Croft said, not looking up from his phone. Elias was a board member, 60 years old, with a face like a bulldog and a reputation for burying companies to strip their assets. Chloe paused. The room went silent. Vanessa smirked, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "I'm sure the break room is stocked, Elias," Chloe said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She pulled out a chair directly opposite him and sat down. "But if you need help analyzing the quarterly yield variance on your portfolio, I can assist with that. I noticed your department is down 3% this quarter." Elias looked up, his eyes bulging. "Excuse me?" "Shall we begin?" Harrison asked, finally looking up. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone before anyone else noticed. "Actually, Harrison," Vanessa interrupted, her voice dripping with faux concern, "I don't think we can. Miss Winters hasn't uploaded the dataset for the Locklear merger. The folders are empty. I checked 10 minutes ago." She gestured to the large screen at the front of the room. It displayed a terrifying error message. "File corrupted." "I sent the files to her yesterday," Vanessa lied smoothly, looking at the board members. "It's a lot of responsibility for someone with her background." "Maybe the system was too complex," the room murmured. "Incompetence. That was the narrative they wanted." Harrison turned to Chloe. His expression was unreadable. "Chloe, where is the data?" Chloe looked at Vanessa. She saw the triumph in the other woman's eyes. Vanessa had corrupted the files on the server, knowing Chloe didn't have a backup. It was a basic corporate sabotage move. But Chloe didn't panic. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a battered, encrypted USB drive. "I anticipated there might be server instability, given the legacy systems Locklear uses," Chloe said, lying effortlessly to cover the sabotage while simultaneously exposing it. "So I kept a local mirror of the raw data. I also ran a deeper analysis than requested. She stood up, walked to the main terminal, and plugged in the drive. The screen flickered. The error message vanished, replaced by a 3D visualization of the company's logistics network. It was beautiful, complex, efficient, and undeniable. Vanessa's team projected a 6-month integration timeline, Chloe said, pointing to the red lines on the map. But they failed to account for the port strikes in Hamburg and the fuel tax shifts in the Eurozone. If we followed their plan, we'd lose 50 million by Q3. Vanessa's smile faltered. However, Chloe continued, tapping a key, the lines turned green. If we reroute the Atlantic supply chain through the secondary hubs in Lisbon, which I noticed are currently operating at 60% capacity, we bypass the tax hike, we save the 50 million, and we integrate in 3 months, not 6. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Elias Croft squinted at the screen. He knew numbers. He hated that she was right. "This is," Elias grunted, "this is accurate." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Excellent work, Chloe. Vanessa, why didn't your team catch the Hamburg variable?" Vanessa went pale. "It was a fluctuating metric, Harrison. We were focusing on the macro." Chloe focused on the macro and the micro. Harrison cut her off cold. "Implement her strategy. Meeting adjourned." As the executives filed out, grumbling and casting wary looks at the waitress, Harrison remained seated. Chloe packed up her drive, her hands shaking, now that the adrenaline was fading. "You knew she tampered with the files," Harrison said quietly. "I guessed she would," Chloe replied. "People like her rely on process. People like me rely on survival." Harrison stood up and walked over to her. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and cold rain. "Be careful, Chloe. You just humiliated the 2 most dangerous people in this building. Elias Croft doesn't like losing money, and Vanessa doesn't like losing face." "And you?" Chloe asked, looking up at him. "What do you like?" Harrison looked down at her, his grey eyes intense. "I like winning. And today, you won." 2 weeks later, the invitation landed on Chloe's desk. It was heavy cardstock, embossed with gold leaf. The Sterling Foundation Annual Gala. Black tie. Saturday, 7:00 p.m. "I'm not going," Chloe told Sarah, who was currently trying to measure Chloe's inseam with a tape measure. "Mr. Sterling insists," Sarah said, her mouth full of pins. "It's a mandatory corporate event, and you cannot wear pants. The dress code is ethereal elegance, whatever that means." "I can't afford ethereal elegance," Chloe muttered. "Mr. Sterling has taken care of it." The dress arrives tomorrow. The night of the gala, the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel was transformed into a winter wonderland. Ice sculptures, white roses, and enough champagne to drown a battleship. Chloe arrived late. She hesitated at the top of the grand staircase. The dress Harrison had sent was breathtaking, a floor-length gown of emerald silk that hugged her frame and left her back exposed. She wore no jewelry. She didn't own any. She felt like an imposter, wrapped in expensive fabric. As she descended the stairs, heads turned. The whispers started. "Is that the waitress? The math girl? Look at her." Harrison was at the bottom of the stairs, talking to the mayor of Seattle. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. His gaze traveled from her face to the hem of the dress and back up. For a moment, the ruthless CEO was gone, replaced by a man struck dumb. He stepped forward, offering his hand. "You clean up well, Ms. Winters." "I feel like I'm undercover," she whispered, taking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "In a way, you are," he murmured, guiding her into the room. "Elias Croft is up to something. He's been smiling all night. It makes me nervous." They circulated the room. Chloe played the part, nodding at boring stories about golf scores and tax havens. But she felt eyes on her. Not just Harrison's. Near the back of the ballroom, a crowd had gathered. A small stage was set up with a single table and 2 chairs. On the table sat a chessboard. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elias Croft's voice boomed over the microphone. He stood on the stage holding a glass of scotch. "Tonight, as a special treat for the Foundation, I have invited a very special guest. Please welcome the International Grandmaster and 3-time European champion, Mr. Sebastian Cross." A man stepped onto the stage. He was sharp-featured, Russian, and looked like a Bond villain. The crowd applauded politely. "Mr. Cross has agreed to play a match for charity," Elias continued, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Harrison and Chloe. $10,000 to the charity for anyone who can last 20 moves against him. 100,000 if you beat him. Elias smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Harrison, you're a strategic mind. Care to try?" Harrison stiffened. He played chess, but he was a casual player. Cross would destroy him in 10 moves. It was a trap designed to humiliate him publicly. If he refused, he looked weak. If he played, he looked incompetent. Harrison began. "I'll play," a clear voice rang out. The crowd parted. Chloe stepped forward, the emerald silk swishing around her legs. Elias laughed. "Ms. Winters, this is a game for kings, not service staff. Do you even know how the knight moves?" "I know enough," Chloe said, walking up the steps. She sat down opposite Sebastian Cross. The Grandmaster looked bored. He didn't even look at her face. "White or black?" Cross sneered. "You take white," Chloe said. "You'll need the advantage." The room gasped. Harrison moved to the edge of the stage, his face pale. "What is she doing?" Cross's eyes narrowed. "He moved his king's pawn." Chloe countered instantly. The Sicilian defense, aggressive, complex. The game moved fast. Cross played with arrogant speed, slamming his pieces down. Chloe played with a terrifying stillness. She didn't hesitate. She didn't blink. By move 12, Cross stopped looking bored. He leaned forward, frowning at the board. By move 18, sweat beaded on his forehead. The room had gone dead silent. By move 24, Chloe sacrificed her queen. "Foolish," Elias Croft heckled from the side. "You threw the game." "Did I?" Chloe asked softly. Cross stared at the board. His hand hovered over his rook. He looked at the queen she had sacrificed. Then he looked at the open lane for her bishop. His face drained of color. He looked up at Chloe. For the first time, he really saw her. He saw the cold calculation in her eyes, the familiarity with the slaughter. "It's a mate in 4, Cross whispered, his voice shaking. "You trapped me in the Rubinstein variation. No one has played that line in a tournament since 1998. He stood up and tipped his king over. Clack. "I resign," Cross announced to the stunned room. "She is not an amateur. She is a master." The room exploded. Harrison stared at Chloe as if she were an alien. Elias Croft looked like he was having a stroke. Chloe stood up, her face impassive. She leaned toward the microphone. "Make the check out to the children's hospital, Elias, and try not to bounce it." She walked off the stage. Harrison caught her arm, pulling her into a secluded alcove behind a velvet curtain. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Waitresses don't fix aerospace algorithms. Waitresses don't beat grandmasters in 24 moves. Who? Ah? You?" Chloe looked away, the mask slipping. "My name is Chloe. That's real. But my last name isn't Winters." "What is it?" "It's Valerius." Harrison froze. "Valerius, as in Alexander Valerius, the tech mogul, the man who invented the neural network logic we all use?" "He was my father," Chloe whispered. He taught me math before I could walk. He taught me chess before I could read. And 5 years ago, he was framed for embezzlement and drove his car off a bridge. The government seized everything. I was left with nothing but a name that everyone hated. So I changed it. Harrison stared at her. The tragedy of the Valerius family was legendary. Alexander Valerius had been a giant, destroyed by a scandal that never quite added up. "You're the lost daughter," Harrison said. "I'm not lost, Harrison," she said, looking him in the eye. "I'm hiding. Because the people who destroyed my father, they are still out there, and some of them do business with this company." Harrison realized then that this wasn't just a job for her. It was a hunt. "Who?" Harrison asked. "I'm not sure yet," Chloe said. "But I think Elias Croft knows them." Harrison stepped closer. The tension between them shifted from professional curiosity to something magnetic. He reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. "You don't have to hide anymore. You have me." He leaned in. Chloe's breath hitched. His lips were inches from hers. "Harrison!" Vanessa Holt appeared around the curtain, her eyes flashing with venom. "The press wants a photo. Now." Harrison pulled back, a muscle in his jaw jumping. He looked at Chloe, a silent promise in his eyes. "We will finish this." "Go," Chloe said. "I need a drink." The high of the chess victory lasted exactly 3 days. On Tuesday morning, 2 men in grey suits walked into Sterling Logistics. They didn't stop at the reception. They went straight to the elevators, flanked by Elias Croft. Chloe was in her office, analyzing a discrepancy in the Asia-Pacific shipping manifest. The numbers were off. Money was moving through a shell company in Singapore, labeled as consulting fees, but the volume matched the exact amount her father had been accused of stealing 5 years ago. "I found it," she thought, her heart pounding. The trail. The door to her office burst open. It wasn't Harrison. It was the 2 men in grey suits, security, and behind them, Harrison. He looked devastated. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed as if he hadn't slept. He held a stack of papers in his hand. "Harrison?" Chloe stood up. "What's wrong? I found something." "Stop," Harrison said. His voice was broken glass. "Just stop lying, Chloe." He threw the papers onto her desk. They slid across the surface, scattering over the floor. They were bank statements, emails. Subject, Project Icarus, sale to Locklear Dynamics. From cwinterseasterlinglogistics.com. To redacted competitor. "We found the server logs," Elias Croft said, stepping into the room with a smug grin. "You've been siphoning proprietary data to our competitors in China since the day you started. And look at this, a deposit of $500,000 into an offshore account in your name. Made yesterday." "What?" Chloe picked up a paper. It looked real. The timestamps, the IP address. It was a masterclass in forgery. "Harrison, I didn't do this. You know I didn't." "The logs don't lie, Chloe," Harrison shouted, losing his composure. "It came from your terminal, your password. The money is in your account." "It's a set-up," Chloe yelled back. "Elias planted it. I was getting close to the Singapore accounts." "Enough." Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. "I defended you. I put my reputation on the line for you. I brought you into my world, and you sold me out." He looked at her with a mixture of hatred and heartbreak that cut deeper than any knife. "You're fired, Chloe. Get out, before I call the police." "Harrison, please, look at the Singapore data. Just look at it." "Escort her out," Harrison ordered the guards, turning his back on her. One of the guards grabbed Chloe's arm. She didn't fight. She looked at Harrison's broad back, rigid with anger. She looked at Elias Croft, who winked at her. She realized then that this was the checkmate. They had seen her coming. They knew who she was, or at least they knew she was dangerous, and they had nuked her from orbit. Chloe pulled her arm free. "Don't touch me," she hissed at the guard. She walked to the door. She paused and looked back at Harrison. "You're the smartest man I know, Harrison. But you're playing checkers. They are playing chess. When you realize what you've done, don't come looking for me." She walked out. The walk through the bullpen was a gauntlet of shame. Vanessa Holt stood by the coffee machine, sipping a latte, watching with a satisfied smile. Chloe left the building. It was raining again. It always seemed to rain when her life fell apart. She didn't go home. She went to an internet cafe in a basement in Chinatown. She paid cash. She sat down at a terminal and pulled up a black screen. Harrison thought he had fired her. He thought he had cut her access. But he forgot one thing. She had written the patch for the core logic on a napkin. When she digitized it, she hadn't just fixed the math. She had installed a backdoor. User: Ghost Queen. Password. Access granted. She could see everything. She saw Harrison in his office, drinking scotch at 11 a.m. She saw Elias Croft emailing the shell company in Singapore. And she saw the security footage from her office the night before. She fast-forwarded. 2 a.m. Her office was dark. Then, a shadow. Someone entered. They sat at her computer. They typed for 10 minutes. Chloe zoomed in. The resolution was grainy, but the face was clear enough. It wasn't Elias Croft, and it wasn't Vanessa Holt. It was Sarah, Harrison's loyal assistant. Chloe sat back, stunned. Sarah, the woman who brought her coffee? The woman who pinned her dress? Sarah was the mole. Sarah was the one who had framed her father 5 years ago. She had been the secretary for Alexander Valerius before she came to Sterling. "Check," Chloe whispered. She didn't delete the footage. She didn't wipe the servers. She did something much worse. She initiated the Doomsday Protocol. It was a script she had written in case this exact moment happened. It wouldn't destroy the data. It would encrypt it. Every file, every email, every logistics route in Sterling Group would be locked behind a 256-bit encryption key that only existed in Chloe's head. She hit enter. On the screen, a progress bar appeared. System lockdown in 60 seconds. Chloe stood up. She pulled the hood of her sweatshirt up. She was done being the waitress. She was done being the victim. She walked out into the rain. By the time Harrison realized his company was being held hostage, she would be halfway to Canada. But she wasn't running away. She was going to find the proof that Sarah was the head of the snake. And when she came back, she wouldn't just clear her name. She would burn their kingdom to the ground. The silence inside Sterling Tower was louder than any alarm. It had been 6 hours since Chloe walked out into the rain. 6 hours since every computer, every server, and every digital lock in the building had slammed shut. Harrison stood in the center of the frantic bullpen. Around him, 300 employees were useless. The logistics tracking screens, usually a mesmerizing river of green data, were pitch black, displaying only a single, blinking line of white text. King's Gambit. Awaiting key. "We can't bypass it, sir," the head of IT said, sweating through his shirt. "It's a kinetic encryption. It rewrites itself every 10 seconds. It's beautiful, actually. If I wasn't so terrified of you, I'd applaud." "I don't pay you to admire the sabotage," Harrison growled, though his stomach was twisting in knots that had nothing to do with the stock price. "Fix it, or you're all fired." He stormed back into his office. Sarah was there, pacing. She looked genuinely distressed. "Harrison," she said, her voice trembling, The board is calling. Elias is demanding an emergency vote of no confidence. He says you lost control of the company." Harrison poured himself a drink, his hand shaking slightly. Elias is right. I have lost control. He looked at the empty desk where Chloe had sat just hours ago. He looked at the scattered papers of the proof against her. In the heat of the moment, blinded by betrayal, he had believed it. The bank transfer. The emails. It was all so damning. But now, in the cold light of the crisis, he picked up the bank statement again. He traced the routing number with his finger. It was a standard SWIFT code for the Cayman Islands, but something about the timestamp caught his eye. Transfer. Initiated. 03:00 a.m. PST. Harrison frowned. At 3:00 a.m. last night, he had been texting Chloe. They were debating the merits of French versus Italian roast coffee. She had sent a photo of her cat sleeping on her keyboard. If she was at her computer initiating a massive illegal transfer, the cat wouldn't have been sleeping on the keys. It was a small detail, a tiny, insignificant variable. But Harrison remembered what Chloe had said about the fuel algorithm. The error is in the static variable. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the security logs for the building. Not the digital ones. Those were locked by Chloe's virus. He went to the physical backup, the analog tape deck in the basement security room that no one bothered to check because it was ancient technology. He ran down 40 flights of stairs. The security guard, a man named Old Miller, was startled as the CEO burst in. "The tapes from last night," Harrison demanded. "Floor 40, hallway B." Miller fumbled with the cassette. Grainy black and white footage flickered onto the CRT monitor. Harrison watched. "Orzo 2:15 a.m. The hallway was empty. Orzo 2:30 a.m. A figure appeared. They didn't come from the elevator. They came from the stairwell. They were wearing a hooded maintenance jacket, but they moved with a distinct, confident gait. They stopped at the keypad to Chloe's office. They didn't hack it. They typed in a code. Harrison's master override code. Only 3 people had that code: Harrison, the head of security, and his executive assistant. The figure entered. 10 minutes later, they left. As they turned to close the door, the hood slipped just an inch. The glare of the emergency exit sign illuminated the face. It wasn't Chloe. It was Sarah. Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. The woman who had organized his life for 5 years. The woman who knew his passwords, his schedule, his weaknesses. She wasn't just a mole. She was the architect. "My God," Harrison whispered. Chloe didn't lock the system to destroy us. She locked it to freeze the evidence. He ran back upstairs, ignoring the burning in his lungs. He burst into the outer office. Sarah was gone. "Where is she?" he yelled at the empty room. He checked her desk. Her phone was gone. Her purse was gone. But on her notepad, there was an imprint of the last thing she had written. He grabbed a pencil and shaded over the paper. An address appeared. 1400 Dockside Avenue, Warehouse 4B. Harrison didn't call the police. He didn't call security. He grabbed his car keys. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of water smashing against the windshield of Harrison's Aston Martin as he tore through the industrial district. Warehouse 4B was a rusted hulk of metal sitting on the edge of the dark water of Puget Sound. There were no lights. Harrison parked a block away. He ran through the rain, his expensive suit soaking through instantly. He found a side door ajar. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit by a single construction lamp. In the center of the vast, empty space, 2 people stood. One was Sarah. She was holding a gun. The other was Chloe. She was tied to a chair, a bruise blooming on her cheekbone. But her eyes were fierce, burning with defiant intelligence. "You can't keep the encryption on forever, Chloe," Sarah was saying, her voice echoing off the metal walls. "Give me the key. I need to scrub the servers before the feds trace the Singapore account back to me." "You're sloppy, Sarah," Chloe spat, blood on her teeth. "You used the same shell company structure you used to frame my father. Did you think I wouldn't recognize the signature? Valerius Tech died so you could get rich. Alexander was a fool," Sarah sneered. "He wanted to give the technology away. Open source, free energy optimization for the world. He was ruining the market. Elias and I just corrected the error." "By killing him," Chloe's voice broke. "He drove off the bridge," Sarah shrugged. "I just cut the brake line. Gravity did the rest." Harrison stepped out from behind a crate. "And what do you plan to do with me, Sarah?" Sarah spun around, the gun wavering. "Harrison, you shouldn't be here." "I saw the tapes," Harrison said, walking slowly towards them. "I know everything. Elias is the money. You are the executioner. And I was the distraction." "You were the perfect patsy," Sarah said, her eyes manic. "The arrogant boy king. Too busy with mergers to notice his company was being hollowed out from the inside. If you hadn't hired her, we would have stripped the assets and left you bankrupt by Christmas." "Let her go," Harrison said. He was 10 feet away. "No." Sarah raised the gun, aiming it at Harrison's chest. "I think I'll write a new story. A tragic murder-suicide. The disgraced waitress kills the CEO who fired her, then turns the gun on herself. It's poetic." "Do the math, Sarah," Chloe said suddenly. Sarah blinked. "What?" "The trajectory," Chloe said, her eyes locked on Harrison. "You're standing on a metal grate. The humidity in here is 98%. You're holding a striker-fired pistol with a hair trigger. Harrison is 6'2". You're 5'7". If you fire, the recoil will throw your aim off by 4 degrees. "Shut up!" Sarah screamed. "And," Chloe continued, her voice rising, "Harrison is closer to the hydraulic lift switch than you are." Harrison didn't hesitate. He lunged to his right, slamming his hand onto the red industrial button on the wall. With a deafening hiss, the floor beneath Sarah gave way. It wasn't a grate. It was a cargo lift. It dropped 3 feet in a split second. Sarah screamed, losing her balance. The gun went off. Bang! The bullet shattering a window high above. Harrison tackled her before she could recover. They hit the metal floor hard. The gun skittered away into the darkness. Sarah clawed at his face, screaming like a banshee. But Harrison was stronger. He pinned her arms, his breathing ragged. "Stay down!" he roared. He looked up. Chloe was still tied to the chair, watching him. He scrambled off Sarah, who was now sobbing in defeat, and ran to Chloe. He fumbled with the knots, his hands shaking. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "God, Chloe. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The ropes fell away. Chloe rubbed her wrists. She looked at Sarah, then at Harrison. She reached out and grabbed his tie, pulling him down into a fierce, desperate kiss. It tasted of rain and blood and adrenaline. "You're terrible at checkers," she whispered against his lips when she pulled back. "But you're not bad at action movies." "Is that a compliment?" "It's a start," she smiled weakly. "Now help me up. We have a board meeting to crash." The boardroom on the 40th floor was in chaos. Elias Croft sat at the head of the table, looking like a king on a throne. "Gentlemen, please. Harrison has abandoned his post. The stock is in freefall. We have no choice but to vote for his immediate removal and the appointment of an interim CEO. I humbly offer myself." "I second the motion," a nervous board member said. "All in favor?" Elias asked, raising his hand. The doors boom open. They didn't just open, they were kicked open. Harrison Sterling walked in, wet, bruised, and looking more dangerous than anyone had ever seen him, and beside him, limping slightly but with her head held high, was Chloe. "I object," Harrison said. Elias stood up, his face pale. Security, remove these trespassers. Security is busy, Chloe said, walking to the main terminal. The screen was still black, displaying the King's Gambit message. Old Miller is currently zip-tying Sarah to a radiator in the warehouse. I don't know what you're talking about, Elias stammered, smoothing his tie. This is preposterous. Is it? Chloe typed 6 characters into the keyboard. VALERIUS. She hit enter. The black screen flashed white. The text vanished. In its place, a cascade of documents appeared. Bank transfers, emails between Elias Croft and Sarah Jenkins, blueprints for the brake line sabotage of Alexander Valerius's car, and finally, the routing logs of the stolen $100 million from Sterling Logistics. The board members gasped. Phones were pulled out. Photos were taken. This is fake, Elias screamed, backing away. It's a deep fake. She's a witch. It's math, Elias, Chloe said, turning to face him. Math doesn't lie. People do. 2 police officers stepped into the room, followed by the FBI. Elias Croft, the lead agent said, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit murder. Elias looked around the room, looking for an ally. He found none. He slumped, the arrogance draining out of him like water from a cracked glass. As they cuffed him and led him away, he looked at Chloe. Who are you? He whispered. I'm the waitress, Chloe said coldly, and you forgot to tip. The sun was shining on Seattle. It was a rare, beautiful day. Chloe stood on the balcony of the Sterling Tower, holding a coffee. She wasn't wearing an oversized apron. She was wearing a tailored cream suit that screamed power. Executive Vice President of Operations, a voice said behind her. She turned. Harrison was leaning against the doorframe. He looked relaxed, happier. It has a nice ring to it, she admitted, but I still think Head of Magic Tricks was a better title. Harrison laughed. He walked over and stood beside her, looking out at the city. The stock is at an all-time high. Locklear wants to double the contract, and the Valerius Foundation has officially reopened, with you as the chairwoman. My father would have liked that, Chloe said softly. He would have liked you, I think. Eventually. Eventually? Harrison raised an eyebrow. He had high standards. He thought no one was smart enough for his daughter. Harrison turned her to face him. He rested his hands on her waist. He was right. I'm not smart enough. I nearly lost you because I looked at the paper instead of the person. I promise I will never make that mistake again. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a ring. Not yet. That was for later. He pulled out a napkin. It was the same linen napkin from the Gilded Fork, framed in a small, elegant glass case. The ink was smudged, but the equation that saved the company and started everything was still visible. I kept it, he said, to remind me that the answer isn't always where you expect it to be. Chloe smiled, tears pricking her eyes. You kept a greasy napkin. I kept the moment I fell in love with you, Harrison corrected. He kissed her, and this time there was no rain, no gunman, no ticking clock. Just the sun, the city, and the infinite probability of a happy ending. So, Harrison whispered against her lips, lunch? I know a great steakhouse, but I hear the service is terrible. Chloe laughed. I hear the waitress runs the place now. Wow, what a ride, right? From pouring coffee to taking down a corporate empire, Chloe proved that you should never underestimate someone just because of their job title. It makes you wonder how many geniuses are walking past us every day, disguised in uniforms, just waiting for someone to hand them a pen. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It helps the channel so much and tells YouTube you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a twist. I want to know what you think. Was Harrison right to fire her initially, or should he have trusted his gut? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.